My name is Clara, and I'm 32 years old. For most of my life, my hands have been covered in either flour or grease, building a dream for my family that they never truly saw as mine. Last Thanksgiving, in the middle of our annual family dinner, my father pointed to the front door and told me to leave and never come back. They believed they were kicking out their dependent, insignificant daughter. What they didn't know was that as I walked out, the governor of our state was pulling up to the curb as my special guest, ready to change my life forever. If you believe that your talent is worth fighting for, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Before I tell you how a single turkey dinner unraveled a lifetime of family secrets, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding your worth when the people closest to you refuse to see it. Before my life became a headline in the local food section, it was a quiet, thankless rhythm of service to my family. I'm a chef. Not the kind you see on television with a celebrity cookbook deal, but the kind who finds magic in turning simple ingredients into memories. My passion was born in my grandmother's kitchen, but it was perfected in the struggling restaurant my parents, Robert and Helen, owned, The Hearth. My younger brother Mark was meant to be its future. At 30, he had the title of manager, but none of the grit or vision the job required. I was the secret ingredient, the ghost in the machine that kept the doors from closing for good. Our family dynamic was a story as old as time. Mark was the golden child, the son who was supposed to carry on the family legacy. I was the responsible daughter, the safety net. They paid for Mark's business degree, which he barely passed, while I worked my way through culinary school at night, paying my own tuition by waiting tables. When I graduated, my dream was to open my own small bistro, but the hearth was failing. My father, a proud but stubborn man, had refused to adapt to the changing tastes of our town. The menu was tired, the decor was dated, and Mark's management style consisted mostly of charming the waitstaff and comping meals for his friends. So, I put my dream on hold. I moved back home, converting the garage into a prep kitchen for a small catering business I hoped to build on the side. But my main job, an unpaid one, was saving the hearth. I spent my weekends revamping the menu, training the kitchen staff on new techniques, and developing dishes that slowly, painstakingly brought customers back. My parents were relieved, but they never gave me the credit. In their eyes, Mark was the hero. The restaurant's modest turnaround was proof of his new direction. My contribution was just expected. It was what family did. I remember the first time the knife of this injustice truly twisted. I had spent weeks perfecting a braised short rib recipe. It was rich, tender, and complex. On its first night on the menu, we sold out. A critic from the local paper came in the following week and wrote a glowing review specifically mentioning the genius short ribs that were putting the hearth back on the map. I was ecstatic. I thought, this is it. This is the moment they'll finally see me. That weekend, my father framed the article and hung it by the entrance. The headline read, "Mark Thompson's vision revitalizes a town classic." In the interview, Mark had taken full credit. "It's an old family recipe I've been modernizing," he'd told the reporter, a smug look on his face in the accompanying photo. When I confronted him, he just laughed. "Come on, Clara, it's good for the brand. Family recipe sounds better than my sister who lives in the garage came up with it." When I looked to my parents for support, my mother just patted my arm. "Don't be so sensitive, dear. A win for the restaurant is a win for everyone. We're a team." But we weren't a team. On a team, everyone's contribution is valued. I was just the workhorse pulling the wagon while my brother held the reins and took the applause. The financial lines were just as blurred. My catering business, Clara's Table, was my one escape, my small claim to independence. I catered small parties, office lunches, and baby showers, slowly building a word-of-mouth reputation for quality and creativity. Every penny I earned was meticulously saved for my bistro. Last year, the restaurant's main convection oven broke down right before the holiday rush. The repair costs were astronomical, and the bank had already turned them down for another loan. My father was in a panic. Mark was useless, just complaining about how this would ruin their December profits. So I did what I always did. I stepped in. I took the $15,000 I had saved my entire bistro fund and paid for a brand new top-of-the-line oven. "You'll pay me back as soon as you can, right?" I asked my father, a knot of anxiety in my stomach. "Of course, sweetheart," he said, hugging me tightly. "You've saved us. We'll start paying you back in January." January came and went. Then, February. When I finally brought it up in March, my father looked at me with genuine confusion. "Pay you back, Clara. It's the family business. It was an investment in your own future. One day this will all be yours and Mark's." It was a punch to the gut. They hadn't seen it as a loan. They'd seen it as my duty. My hard-earned money, my dream, was absorbed into the family machine without a second thought. From then on, I knew I had to be more careful. I stopped talking about my savings. I downplayed my catering successes. My dream of a bistro felt further away than ever, but I refused to let it die. I just had to work harder, be smarter, and protect what was mine. I kept telling myself it was for family, a word that was starting to taste more like an obligation than a comfort. I was about to learn that their definition of the word was a one-way street, and I was going the wrong way. The catalyst for change didn't arrive with a dramatic announcement or a sudden tragedy. It arrived quietly on a Tuesday afternoon in the form of an email with a subject line so formal I almost dismissed it as spam catering inquiry from the office of the governor. My heart skipped a beat. I thought it had to be a mistake, a prank orchestrated by one of Mark's friends. But I opened it anyway. The email was concise and professional. It was an invitation to submit a proposal to cater the annual Governor's Charity Ball, the most prestigious social event in the state, just 6 weeks away. The guest list was over 300 people, including philanthropists, politicians, and business leaders. It was the kind of opportunity I didn't even dare to dream about. But it wasn't a mistake, and it wasn't random. As I read the details, a memory from a year ago flooded back, one I had shared with no one. I had been catering a small outdoor wedding for a lovely couple. It was a beautiful day, but chaotic. During the cocktail hour, I noticed a little girl, no older than 7, wandering near the dessert table. Her face was flushed, and she was breathing heavily. As I got closer, I saw her throat looked tight and her lips were starting to swell. Her parents were across the lawn, engaged in conversation. I recognized the signs immediately from my mandatory first aid training: anaphylaxis. I didn't hesitate. I ran to her calmly, asking if she was okay. She could only wheeze in response. I saw a medical alert bracelet on her wrist, identifying a severe nut allergy. I looked at the dessert table. The macarons were made with almond flour. My heart dropped. I yelled for someone to call 911 and asked the girl if she had her medicine. She pointed a shaky finger to a small purse on her mother's chair. I sprinted over, found the EpiPen inside, and administered the injection just as I'd been trained. I held her, speaking to her in a calm voice, until the paramedics arrived. The girl's parents were horrified and eternally grateful. The father, a tall man with a kind but authoritative presence, held my hand and looked me straight in the eye. "You saved our daughter's life," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "My name is John Thompson. If there is ever anything you need, you call me." I hadn't recognized him at the time, but I later saw his picture in the news. He was Governor John Thompson. I never called. I wasn't the kind of person to capitalize on a crisis. I was just glad the little girl was okay. I never told my family the story. It felt too private, too profound. I knew they would either dismiss it, or worse, Mark would find a way to make it about himself. Now, a year later, this email sat in my inbox. A note at the bottom from the governor's chief of staff read, "Governor Thompson and the First Lady have not forgotten your quick thinking and professionalism. They would be honored if you would consider this event." Tears welled in my eyes. It wasn't just a catering gig. It was recognition. It was a sign that my work, my skill, my character had value beyond the 4 walls of my family's restaurant. That night I brought it up at dinner, my hands shaking slightly as I held my phone. "I got an interesting email today," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've been invited to bid for the governor's ball. My mother looked up from her plate, unimpressed. The governor, don't be silly, Clara. It's probably a scam to get your banking information. Mark snorted. Yeah, right. Like they'd pick some no-name caterer from our garage. Did you check the email address? My father just grunted. Focus on the hearth, Clara. Thanksgiving is our busiest week. We need your head in the game, not in the clouds. Their dismissal was like a douse of cold water. It's real, I said a little more forcefully than I intended. They specifically requested me. I explained the connection, the story of the little girl. For a moment, they were silent, stunned. But the awe quickly morphed into suspicion and jealousy. Well, you should have told us, my mother, said her tone accusatory. Hiding something like that seems dishonest. Mark's eyes narrowed. So you're going to use that story to get a job. Seems a little manipulative. There was no pride in their faces, no excitement for me. Only a cold calculation of how this reflected on them. Their lack of enthusiasm was a familiar ache in my chest. A wound I thought had long since calloused over. But I had no idea it was just the first tremor before the earthquake, the first crack in a dam of resentment that was about to burst wide open and wash away everything I thought I knew about family. In the days that followed, my life split into two parallel realities. In one, I was an excited, terrified, and determined chef meticulously planning the biggest event of my career. I submitted my proposal, a sophisticated menu celebrating our state's local harvest, and to my astonishment, it was accepted within 48 hours. The contract was signed. The deposit was wired to my account. It was happening. My nights were filled with recipe testing, supplier calls, and logistical spreadsheets. I felt alive, energized by a purpose that was entirely my own. In the other reality, the one that existed within my parents' house, I was a traitor. My success wasn't a cause for celebration. It was a source of inconvenience and a direct threat to the established family order. The passive-aggressive comments quickly escalated into outright sabotage each incident, a carefully placed stone in the wall they were building between us. The first major act of war came from Mark. I needed the restaurant's large kitchen space for a full-day prep session to handle the volume for the ball. I had cleared it with him weeks in advance, putting it on the shared calendar. The day before, I spent hours organizing my ingredients, portioning out spices and labeling containers. I arrived at the restaurant at 5 a.m. The next morning, ready for a marathon 16-hour day, only to find the kitchen doors locked and a sign taped to the front closed for emergency deep cleaning and pest control. Do not enter. I stood there in the pre-dawn chill, my breath catching in my throat. I called Mark, my voice trembling with a mixture of confusion and rage. What is this? We had this scheduled. He sounded groggy and completely unconcerned. Oh yeah, sorry about that. The health inspector did a surprise visit yesterday afternoon, said we had a critical violation. Had to call in a rush crew. Can't risk getting shut down, you know. It was a lie, and we both knew it. The health inspection wasn't for another 2 months. He had invented a crisis to lock me out, to remind me that he controlled my access, my ability to succeed. I lost an entire critical day of prep, forcing me to scramble and spend money I didn't have to rent a small shared kitchen space at the last minute. When I presented my parents with the rental receipt, my father just shook his head. This is what happens when you get distracted, Clara. If you were focused on the hearth, you'd know our schedule. Next came my mother's psychological warfare. She appointed herself my unsolicited consultant, hovering in my garage kitchen as I tried to work, offering a steady stream of confidence-eroding criticism disguised as motherly advice. Are you sure about serving duck confit, dear? It sounds a bit pretentious. Most people prefer a simple roast chicken. She'd pick up one of my delicate handcrafted appetizers and frown. This looks awfully complicated. You'll never be able to make 300 of these. You should make my classic sausage rolls instead. Everyone loves those. Her words were like tiny, persistent needles jabbing at my professional insecurities. She wasn't trying to help. She was trying to shrink me to reduce my grand vision to the familiar, safe mediocrity of her own kitchen. She wanted me to cater the governor's ball as if it were a church potluck. The constant undermining was exhausting. It made me second-guess every choice, every flavor pairing I had been so confident about. I started working only late at night after she had gone to bed just to have some peace. The final escalation before the Thanksgiving showdown came from my father. He sat me down in the living room one evening, his face grim. It was the same spot where he'd lecture me about my grades as a child. "Clara," he began, his voice heavy with disappointment, "your mother and I are worried. This event has taken over your life. You're neglecting your duties here." "My duties?" I asked, incredulous. "I'm still working weekends at the restaurant, Dad. For free." He waved his hand dismissively. "That's not what I mean. Your focus is fractured. The hearth is a family legacy. This catering thing is a flash in the pan. What happens when it's over? You need to think long term." Then came the real reason for the meeting. "I want to see the contract you signed with the governor's office," he said, his tone shifting from paternal to prosecutorial. "And a full budget. The restaurant provided the space and the equipment you've been using for years. There needs to be a discussion about the family's share of the profits." I was speechless. They wanted a cut. They saw my single greatest professional achievement, not as my own, but as a corporate asset of the hearth, a business I had no ownership in. "There is no family share," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "This is my contract. My business. Clara's table." He recoiled as if I'd slapped him. "Such an ungrateful attitude," he muttered. "After everything we've done for you." That weekend, I met my best friend Sarah for coffee. My hands were shaking as I recounted the events of the past few weeks. I felt like I was losing my mind, caught in a fog of guilt and anger. Was I being ungrateful? Was I selfish? Sarah listened patiently, her expression growing stormier with every word. When I finished, she reached across the table and took my hands. "Clara, listen to me," she said, her voice firm. "This is not about gratitude. This is about control. They are not proud of you. They are terrified of you. Your success proves that you don't need them. It threatens Mark's position as the golden child and their narrative of you as the dependable, unpaid helper. They are not trying to help you. They are trying to sabotage you to keep you small and keep you right where they want you." Hearing her say it out loud was like a key turning in a lock. The fog began to clear. It wasn't me. It was them. The problem wasn't my ambition. It was their insecurity. Sarah was right. But even with that clarity, I was still trying to navigate the impossible to somehow succeed in my new world without completely blowing up the old one. I still thought I could keep the peace. I had no idea they were about to hand me the match and dare me to light the fuse. The breaking point arrived as it so often does in families under the guise of tradition. It was the week of Thanksgiving. The governor's ball was the following Saturday, a mere 2 days after the holiday. My schedule was planned down to the minute. Thanksgiving Day was my last and most crucial full day of prep. I planned to work a straight 18 hours, a final push to ensure everything was perfect. I had already informed my family that I would be working and would miss the big dinner. I had offered to drop off my signature pumpkin pies in the morning, a peace offering I hoped would smooth things over. They had saved their ambush for Tuesday night. I walked into the house exhausted after a 12-hour day of supplier runs and prep work, to find all 3 of them waiting for me in the kitchen. It felt like an intervention. "Clara, we need to talk about Thanksgiving," my mother began, her arms crossed. "Your aunt, uncle, and all the cousins are coming, 22 people in total. I've made a list of what you'll need to cook." She slid a piece of paper across the table. It wasn't a list, it was a battle plan. 2 turkeys, 3 kinds of stuffing, mashed potatoes, sweet potato, casserole, green beans, gravy, cranberry sauce, and 3 different kinds of pies. It was the entire feast. I stared at the list, then back at their expectant faces. I think there's been a misunderstanding, I said, slowly, trying to keep my voice calm. I told you I'm working on Thursday. It's my final prep day for the ball. I can bring pies, but I can't cook the whole meal. Mark scoffed from his chair. You can't be serious. You're going to ditch your own family on Thanksgiving for a catering job. It's not just a job, Mark, I shot back. It's the governor's ball. It's the biggest event of my life. And yes, I am going to prioritize the professional contract I signed. A contract doesn't mean more than family, my mother said, her voice rising with a dramatic quaver. We have traditions. You have always cooked Thanksgiving dinner. People are expecting it. It was then that my father stepped in, assuming the role of judge and jury. This is not a request, Clara, he said, his voice low and cold. This is about loyalty. It's about our family's reputation. What will people think when they find out you were too busy for your own family? They'll think you've gotten too big for your britches. He took a step closer, his eyes hard. You have a choice. You can be a daughter and a sister, or you can be this caterer. You will cancel whatever you have planned for Thursday, and you will be in this kitchen at 6 a.m. to cook for your family. The audacity of it stole my breath. Cancel, I whispered. Dad, I can't cancel. This is a legally binding contract. There are hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line, not to mention my entire professional future. He looked at me with pure disdain. I am sick of hearing about your little hobby, he spat the words, dripping with contempt. The hearth is a real business. Your family is a real obligation. You will do your duty. Hobby. That one word was the spark that ignited a lifetime of suppressed anger. All my sacrifice, my unpaid labor, my $15,000 oven, my sleepless nights, all of it reduced to a little hobby. In that moment, staring at the three of them, my smug brother, my manipulative mother, and my tyrannical father, I finally saw the truth in its stark, ugly clarity. They didn't love me for who I was. They loved me for what I did for them. My purpose in this family was to serve, to support, to be small. My success wasn't something to be proud of. It was an act of rebellion to be stamped out. I felt a strange calm settle over me. The frantic need to please them, to win their approval, simply vanished. It was like a switch had been flipped. I looked at my father, the man whose validation I had craved my entire life, and I felt nothing but a profound, hollow sadness. I didn't have to fight them anymore. I just had to leave. In that moment, standing in the kitchen that smelled of so many childhood memories, I realized that part of my life was over. And a new terrifying and exhilarating chapter was about to begin. I didn't storm out. I didn't yell. I simply picked up the ridiculous cooking list from the table, folded it neatly, and put it in my pocket. Okay, I said, my voice eerily serene. I understand. They mistook my calmness for surrender. I could see the victory in their eyes. Mark smirked, my mother looked relieved, and my father gave a curt nod as if to say, Good. The proper order has been restored. They had no idea that my surrender was not to them, but to the truth. The truth that I was on my own, and I needed a new plan. Immediately. My secret weapon wasn't a hidden fortune or a piece of damning evidence. It was something far more powerful, a genuine human connection built on respect. It was the gratitude of Governor Thompson and his wife, Laura. They didn't see me as a hobbyist caterer. They saw me as the woman who had saved their child's life. They saw me as a professional whose talent they admired. My advantage was that the most powerful man in the state was in my corner, and my family had no clue about the depth of that relationship. I went to my room, closed the door, and my facade of calm shattered. I slid down the door, silent tears of rage, and heartbreak streaming down my face. I gave myself exactly 5 minutes to grieve the family I wished I had. Then I stood up, washed my face, and got to work. My first call was to Sarah. They did it, I whispered into the phone. They gave me an ultimatum. The family or my career. So what's it going to be, she asked, though she already knew the answer. "I'm choosing me," I said, a surge of adrenaline cutting through the pain. "And I need your help. I need to get out." The plan formed quickly, a desperate but clear strategy for escape. First, I needed a new kitchen. The restaurant was compromised, and my garage was now enemy territory. Sarah, a real estate agent, made a few calls. Within an hour, she had found a small restaurant that had recently closed. The owner, a friend of hers, agreed to rent me the fully equipped kitchen for the week for a reasonable fee. It was a miracle. Second, I needed to move my things, my specialized equipment, my expensive ingredients, my recipes. I couldn't risk Mark accidentally spilling bleach on my saffron or my father misplacing my copper pots. That night, after my parents and brother were asleep, Sarah and I began Operation Exodus. We worked in hushed silence like spies on a mission, loading my car with boxes of equipment tools and non-perishables. We made 3 trips to the new kitchen, stocking it with everything I needed. By 4 a.m., my garage kitchen was a hollow shell. I had left only the basics enough to maintain the illusion that I was still working there. The final and most crucial part of my plan involved the governor. This was the riskiest move, but I knew it was necessary. The next morning, I called his chief of staff, a woman named Margaret. I explained with as much professional poise as I could muster that due to a sudden family emergency and loss of my primary workspace, my prep schedule was in jeopardy. I didn't give her the sordid details, but I stressed that I was fully committed to fulfilling my contract. Margaret was incredible. She immediately arranged for 2 culinary students from the state university to assist me as prep cooks for the rest of the week, their fees covered by the event's contingency fund. Then I took a deep breath and made a bolder request. "Margaret," I said, "I know this is highly unusual, but would it be possible to speak with the governor and the First Lady for just a moment?" To my surprise, she put me right through. I explained to Governor Thompson what had happened, not in a whiny or emotional way, but as a statement of fact. "My family has demanded I cancel the contract to cook Thanksgiving dinner. They do not believe this is a serious career path for me." I could hear the anger in his voice when he responded. "Clara, that is unacceptable. Your talent is immense. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise." Then I laid out my idea. It was a crazy theatrical long shot, but the look on my father's face when he gave me the ultimatum had ignited something defiant in me. "Governor," I said, "I have a special request. It has to do with Thanksgiving Day itself. I know you have your own family plans, but..." I told him my plan. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then I heard him chuckle. "Clara," he said, "I think that is a brilliant idea. Consider it done. We'll see you on Thursday." For the next 2 days, I lived a double life. At home, I was quiet and seemingly compliant. I told my mother I would handle Thanksgiving, letting her believe I had canceled the ball. The relief on their faces was sickening. They thought they had successfully crushed my little rebellion. They had no idea that every night I was at my secret kitchen working with my 2 new assistants, catching up on my prep schedule. We were a whirlwind of chopping, braising, and baking. For the first time, I felt like a real executive chef, leading a team, my vision coming to life. They thought they had won. They were already celebrating their victory, planning to enjoy the fruits of my labor on Thanksgiving Day. They had no idea I wasn't just planning to walk out on dinner. I was walking out on the life they had laid out for me, and I was taking my future with me. Thanksgiving morning arrived, crisp and cold. The house was filled with the smug, self-satisfied energy of a family that believed it had won. I woke early, but instead of heading to the kitchen to wrestle with a 20-pound turkey, I took a long shower. I didn't put on an apron. I put on a dark green cashmere sweater, tailored black pants, and a pair of elegant ankle boots. I styled my hair and put on makeup. I was dressing not for a day of cooking, but for a day of liberation. When I came downstairs at 9 a.m., the kitchen was still dark and quiet. My mother was in the living room arranging a centerpiece. She looked up, a frown creasing her forehead. "Clara, you're not dressed. The guests will be here in 4 hours. You need to get the turkeys in the oven." "Good morning, Mom," I said calmly, pouring myself a cup of coffee. The turkeys are not my responsibility today. Her jaw dropped. What did you say? We had an agreement. You said you would handle it, Mark wandered in, still in his pajamas, drawn by the sound of conflict. What's going on? He asked. Your sister seems to think she's a guest in this house, my mother snapped. I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the warmth steady me. I am not a guest, I said, looking directly at her. And I am not the staff. I told you I have a contract to fulfill for the governor's ball. I will be working today. I believe you and Mark are in charge of Thanksgiving dinner. The color drained from Mark's face. You didn't cancel, but Dad told you to. Yes, he did, I acknowledged. And I chose my career. I chose myself. Just then, my father walked in, dressed and ready to play the part of the gracious host. He took one look at me, at my attire, at the empty kitchen, and his face turned to stone. What is the meaning of this? He boomed. Get in that kitchen. Now. No, I said. The word hung in the air, small but solid. It was the first time in my life I had ever given him an unequivocal no. I will not, I repeated, my voice stronger now. My work and my contract are important. My future is important. And I will no longer set myself on fire to keep this family warm. The argument exploded. For the next 20 minutes, they threw everything they had at me. I was selfish, ungrateful, a traitor. I was delusional for thinking my hobby mattered more than family. I stood my ground, not yelling, but refusing to back down. I let their accusations wash over me, recognizing them for what they were, the desperate death throes of their control over me. Finally, my father reached his breaking point. He stalked towards me, his face red with fury, and pointed a trembling finger at the front door. Fine, he hissed, his voice low and venomous. If your career is more important than this family, then you are no longer welcome in this house. Leave. Get out and don't come back. My mother gasped, a flicker of fear in her eyes. Mark looked shocked. They had pushed, but they hadn't expected me to push back so hard that the whole structure would collapse. This was it. The moment of no return. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I felt a strange, soaring sense of relief. All right, I said quietly. I placed my coffee cup in the sink, walked to the hall closet, and retrieved my coat and purse. As I turned to face them one last time, I saw their expressions change from anger to utter disbelief. They had actually done it. They had kicked me out. They thought it was my ultimate punishment. But as I walked towards the door, a sleek black sedan with official government plates pulled silently to the curb in front of the house. My family froze their eyes wide, following my gaze out the window. The back door of the car opened, and a man in a sharp suit stepped out. He was tall, distinguished, and instantly recognizable. It was Governor John Thompson. He didn't wait for me to come out. He walked up the path and knocked confidently on the door I was about to exit. My father, moving like a man in a trance, opened it. Governor, he stammered, his face a comical mask of confusion. The governor smiled warmly, but his eyes were fixed on me. Clara, there you are, he said, his voice booming through the silent house. Laura and I were visiting her parents just a few towns over, and I told her, we have to stop by and wish our favorite chef a happy Thanksgiving. We are just so incredibly excited about Saturday. He stepped inside his presence, filling the room and shrinking my family in an instant. He turned to my father, shaking his hand, while my dad just stared blankly. Robert, you must be so immensely proud of this daughter of yours. This young woman is a hero and a culinary genius. I'm not exaggerating when I say the entire state is about to know her name. My mother looked like she might faint. Mark was staring at the governor as if he were an alien who had just landed on the lawn. The governor then looked back at me, his expression shifting to one of polite concern. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important, he asked, a subtle glint in his eye. Not at all, I said, a small smile playing on my lips. I was just leaving. Perfect, he said smoothly. In that case, perhaps you could spare me a moment. I have something for you. He gestured for me to join him on the porch. As we stepped outside into the crisp November air, he handed me a thick manila envelope. "This is in advance for your services," he said quietly. "And something else. It's a preliminary contract to become a preferred caterer for all official state functions for the next year," my board insisted. "They were that impressed with your proposal." I looked down at the documents, then back at the house. Through the window, I could see my family huddled together, their faces pale with shock, watching the scene unfold. They had just thrown away their daughter, the hobbyist, and now the most powerful man in the state was standing on their doorstep, anointing her as a star. The governor placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You have a gift, Clara," he said. "Don't ever let anyone make you feel small for sharing it with the world." He then opened the car door for me. "My driver can take you wherever you need to go." As the car pulled away from the curb, I looked in the rearview mirror. My father was standing on the porch, his shoulders slumped. It wasn't anger on his face anymore. It was the dawning, horrifying, and complete understanding of exactly what he had just lost. The ride in the governor's car was quiet. I stared out the window at the passing suburban houses, each with smoke curling from its chimney, each a symbol of a family life I no longer belonged to. But instead of the crushing weight of loss I had expected, I felt light. The silence in the car wasn't empty. It was peaceful. It was the sound of the rest of my life beginning. The driver dropped me off at my rented kitchen, where my 2 student assistants were already hard at work, their energy and enthusiasm a welcome balm. "Everything okay, chef?" one of them asked, noticing my expression. Everything I said, a real smile spreading across my face for the first time that day, is perfect. I never went back to the house. I called Sarah from the kitchen, and my rock agreed to go the next day with her husband to retrieve the rest of my personal belongings. She told me later that the scene was grim. The house was silent, the elaborate Thanksgiving dinner never cooked. My mother had been crying, and my father just sat in his armchair staring into space. They didn't put up a fight. They simply pointed to my room and let her pack. They knew they had lost. The 2 days leading up to the governor's ball were a blur of focused, joyful work. For the first time, I was cooking without the weight of my family's judgment, without the constant background noise of their disapproval. In my own kitchen, surrounded by a team that respected me, my creativity soared. I was not just a cook. I was an artist, a leader. I was exactly who I was meant to be. The ball was a spectacular success. Every detail, from the miniature beet and goat cheese tarts to the elegant sea base entree, was executed flawlessly. The guests raved. Food critics who were in attendance took my business card. The First Lady Laura sought me out at the end of the night to give me a hug, her eyes shining. "Clara, that was more than a meal," she said. "It was an experience. My husband was right about you." That night, as I drove home to Sarah's guest room where I was temporarily staying, the local news radio was recapping the event. The reporter gushed about the food, naming Clara's table as the breakout star of the evening. I had to pull over, overwhelmed by the surreal, wonderful reality of it all. The aftermath for my family was swift and brutal. News of my success spread through our town like wildfire. The story of the governor showing up on Thanksgiving Day became a piece of local legend, though the embarrassing details of why he was there remained a family secret. The contrast between my soaring reputation and the hearth's steady decline became glaringly obvious. Without my recipes and my free labor, the restaurant's quality plummeted. Mark, stripped of his safety net, was exposed as the incompetent manager he truly was. Customers stopped coming. The glowing review that had once hung proudly by the door now seemed like a relic from a different era. I found a small apartment downtown within a week, a bright, airy space that was all mine. The first piece of furniture I bought was a large dining table. It wasn't for entertaining a crowd, it was for me. A place to spread out my cookbooks, to sketch out new ideas, to sit and enjoy a meal in peace. The silence that had once felt lonely now felt like freedom. I had spent so long trying to earn a seat at their table, I had never stopped to realize I could build my own. I had built my new life on a foundation of self-respect, one dish at a time. Meanwhile, the foundation of my family's legacy, built on entitlement and injustice, was beginning to show deep, irreparable cracks. 9 months after that fateful Thanksgiving, the landscape of my life was unrecognizable. The buzz from the governor's ball hadn't just faded. It had blossomed into a sustainable, thriving career. The offers that poured in afterwards were overwhelming at first, but with the help of a business consultant, Sarah recommended I navigated them carefully. I turned down offers to franchise or expand too quickly. Instead, I focused on my original dream. In August, I signed a lease on a beautiful, sun-drenched space in the historic heart of our city. In September, I opened Clara's Table, my very own bistro. It was everything I had ever dreamed of. Small, intimate, with an open kitchen where guests could see the magic happen. The menu was a reflection of me, creative, honest, and made with love. From day one, we were booked solid for weeks in advance. I hired a small team of passionate young chefs and a manager who shared my vision. I was paying them a fair wage, offering benefits, and creating the kind of supportive, respectful work environment I had never had. I was not just a business owner, I was building a community. The local paper, the same one that had once credited Mark for my work, now ran a full-page feature on me titled "Clara Thompson, the Chef Who Built Her Own Table." It felt like the closing of a circle. My financial independence was the most tangible symbol of my new life. I was not just stable, I was successful. I bought a small condo with a balcony where I grew my own herbs. The constant low-grade anxiety about money that had been my lifelong companion was gone, replaced by the quiet confidence of knowing I could rely on myself. The fate of my family, in contrast, was a slow, painful unraveling. As I had predicted, the hearth could not survive without its secret ingredient. The restaurant limped along for another 6 months after I left its reputation in tatters. Mark tried a series of desperate gimmicks, 2-for-1 wing nights, karaoke Tuesdays, each one cheapening the brand my father had spent his life building. Finally, facing foreclosure, my parents made the heartbreaking decision to sell. They didn't get much for it. It was sold to a chain that promptly gutted the historic interior and turned it into a generic sports bar. The hearth of our family was officially extinguished. The financial fallout was devastating for them. They had to sell the family home, the house I had grown up in, to cover the restaurant's debts. They moved into a small rented condo on the outskirts of town. Mark, humbled and defeated, took a job as a line cook at a chain restaurant, the very fate he had always felt so superior to. He was no longer the golden child. He was just a man who had been given every advantage and had squandered it all. They did try to reconcile. About 3 months after I left, my mother called weeping. She apologized, sort of. Her apology was a tangled mess of regret, self-pity, and blame. "We just didn't realize what we had," she cried. "We miss you. The restaurant is falling apart." It was an apology born of desperation, not true remorse. I listened, and I felt a distant sadness for her, but the old urge to rush in and fix everything was gone. I agreed to meet them for coffee a few weeks later. They looked older, worn down by failure. They asked me for money. Not as a loan this time, but as a plea. They wanted me to help them get back on their feet. I thought about it for a long time. The old Clara would have written a check without a second thought, sacrificing her own security for their comfort. But the new Clara had learned the importance of boundaries. "I will help you," I said, and I saw a flicker of the old entitlement in their eyes. "But not in the way you think." I set up a small, automated monthly payment to their account. It wasn't enough to live lavishly, but it was enough to cover their basic rent and utilities. It was a gift, not an obligation, and it came with conditions. "This is what I am willing to do," I told them firmly. "Our relationship from now on will be on these terms. I will not be your financial safety net. I will not be your on-call therapist. I will not be involved in the restaurant or any of Mark's future schemes. We can have a polite, respectful relationship from a distance. That is all I can offer." It wasn't the answer they wanted, but it was the one they had earned. My father, to his credit, seemed to understand. He nodded slowly, a deep sadness in his eyes. He finally saw me not as a utility, but as an independent adult he no longer had any claim over. My mother was still struggling to accept it, but they took the deal because they had no other choice. Sometimes I drive by the sports bar that used to be the hearth, and I feel a pang of nostalgia for what it once was, for the family I thought we were. But the feeling passes, quickly replaced by a profound sense of gratitude. They had to kick me out for me to finally find my way home to myself. I had learned that you can love your family from a distance, and sometimes that is the only way you can truly learn to love yourself up close. Sitting here today in the bustling dining room of my own restaurant, it's hard to believe that less than a year ago, my biggest ambition was to earn a crumb of approval from my family. The irony is that their greatest act of rejection turned out to be my greatest gift. Being told to leave that Thanksgiving dinner felt like an ending, but it was actually the beginning. It forced me to stop waiting for a seat at their table and to finally build my own. The most important lesson I've learned is that your value is not determined by the people who are committed to misunderstanding you. For years, I believed their definition of me, the helpful daughter, the backup plan, the hobbyist. I shrank myself to fit into the small box they had built for me. But your worth is inherent. It exists whether people choose to see it or not. The moment I stopped seeking their validation and started trusting my own talent was the moment my entire world changed. True family, I've discovered, are the people who pull up a chair to your table when you build it. They are the friends like Sarah who help you move in the dead of night. They are the mentors like Governor Thompson who see your potential and offer a hand up, not a handout. They are the team you build, who share your passion and celebrate your wins as their own. Family is not about obligation. It's about celebration. It's not about who you're born with. It's about who respects you enough to let you grow. My old life was built on sacrifice. My new life is built on purpose. I no longer cook to please others. I cook to express myself, to create joy, to build a community. The pain of my family's betrayal will likely always be a part of my story, a faint scar that reminds me of where I came from. But it is not the whole story. The real story is about what came after the strength, the independence, and the profound peace that comes from finally truly being yourself. I have a question for all of you watching. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between your own dream and your family's expectations? What did you do and what did you learn from it? Please share your stories in the comments below. I'd love to read them. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to build their own table. Thank you for listening. And remember, your worth is not up for negotiation.